So why do we kill the ego? Why do we want to kill the ego, right? Why do people talk about killing the ego? The purpose of killing the ego is not actually death of the ego, is not actually to rid ourselves of the ego, right? We first need to understand that in religions that talk about killing or death of the ego, right? In Gnostic Christianity, they talk about killing the self, right? When they refer to death itself, death is simultaneous and equal to rebirth, right? So every time that you die, every time that a part of you dies, there's supposed to be a new aspect of yourself reborn, right? So we talk about killing the ego. What we're doing is we're killing the false self, right? We're killing the false ego, the one that was created through programming, right? Not through our own conscious will, right? And we're killing these egos in order to make room to create a stronger ego. So I'm going to talk about the process of creating an ego, because really we don't want to just destroy ourselves and continue to destroy ourselves, right? We want to break down the parts of ourselves that don't align, but for the purpose of rebuilding it, right? I had an epiphany today, or just like a realization today, that the process of killing the ego is one aspect, but we actually need to build and create a strong ego, right? We still need to have and maintain a powerful ego, but one that is directed by our will, right? Not one that is created by our mind's programming, and one that controls us and controls our life. And so that's the purpose of killing the ego. We kill the ego that has control of us, that has enslaved us, and we recreate the ego in our image, right? So that we're the ones in control and the ones that have the power over who we are and how we reflect ourselves. So the way we kill the ego is through changing our habits, right? Meditation and learning how to reprogram our mind and change beliefs, change the way we view the world, right? The way we view ourselves as well, right? We alter our state of mind, we alter our energetic state, our emotions, how we feel, right? We start to alter this and go against the normal programming, and that brings up all of the egos, that brings up all of our insecurity, our desire to stay the same, our desire to not change, right? And we have to destroy these insecurities in order to move forward, in order to change, in order to create a better life for ourselves, right? So we destroy these old characteristics of ourselves, but what needs to happen is we need to be creating a stronger sense of self. We need to be creating a new self in place of the old habits, the old loop, the old way of being, right? Because what will happen is if we destroy it and then we leave that space, we leave that empty space, eventually it'll come back. Or what you'll do is you'll end up getting to a point where you have destroyed yourself, right? You've broken down all of the aspects of yourself to the point that you are just nothing, right? You're just spirit, right? You're just kind of lost in the mind, right? Because you have decimated any sense of identity within this world, but you have to create a sense of identity that is reflective of that spirit, of that soul, right? Of that inner experience, that being that you know you are. And how we do this is by not just changing our old habits, not just changing our old ways, but actually fully replacing them, right? We don't want to just remove a habit. The death of the old habit is birth, is a rebirth for you, and a chance for you to create a new habit, right? It's a chance and an opportunity for you to change your habits and move towards healthier habits, move towards better habits, move towards habits that will enrich the soul, enrich your being, right? And in this sense, the ego itself isn't bad. It is our fault that the ego has become the way it has, right? The ego is simply reflective of who we are inside, our thoughts, our feelings, and the actions that we take on a daily basis. This is what creates our identity, our sense of self. When we start to realize that we are the ones in control and we change this sense of self, we experience a better life. We experience a better existence. This is also our fault, our responsibility. We have chosen to create this, and so we deserve to experience it. And those who have created a negative sense of self, a negative reality for themselves, also deserve that negative reality, right? Because they are the ones in control. Ignorant of the fact or not, they are the ones creating that experience. They are the ones creating that existence. And yes, when someone is unconscious, outside forces can direct them easier, right? They may be swayed by their environment more often than not, but that being swayed is their responsibility. Like, they're the ones responsible for taking control of that, because they're the ones allowing their consciousness to be taken, whether they know it or not. And so that's the purpose of a lot of my content, is to make people aware of the fact that they are the ones in control. Because once you have the awareness and you start to see it, it may take time. But when you start to observe that reality within your life, you start to observe the fact that you're the one creating these experiences, it makes it a lot easier to change, right? It makes it a lot easier to create a different life for yourself. So I think that for the past few months, maybe longer, maybe a little under a year, I've been getting really good at destroying and breaking down these egos, as well as becoming aware of these egos, right? But I didn't really focus on the idea of recreating that ego, recreating that self, right? So I didn't have much to replace the destroyed ego with, right? I didn't have much to replace it with, because I wasn't making the necessary changes in my life. I was simply destroying the identity, right? Destroying the sense of self within my mind. And so what we need to do is we need to become aware of these psychological egos, destroy them and break them down. But as we break them down, rebuild the ego, rebuild the self with the new habits, with the new way of being, right? And so what I've been learning to do is focusing more on the productive routine, or the productive habits, like the things that I actually want to do, instead of the habits that are in my way, right? So instead of focusing on the habits that are in the way, focusing on the habits that are stopping you, that are blocking you, focus on the new routine, focus on the new self, right? Even if that seems overwhelming, the longer you focus on it, the longer you observe it, the more you will become accustomed to it, the more you'll be able to program your brain. So I'll tell you one thing that I've been doing. I can't believe my phone's in my pocket. That almost never happens. So I created a new timetable. I've created a new timetable for myself. If you can see that, that's some of it. What I've been doing is, because I haven't started that monk mode yet, I'm just kind of transitioning. So I'm working on finishing up some of the things from the last monk mode period. I'm getting ready to go on a longer fast and stuff. But what I've been doing is I've just been reading over that routine pretty much in all of my spare time, all of my free time, right? And what that's doing is that's programming and priming my brain in order to follow that routine. Like today, I find myself just naturally planning my day according to that routine. And that's the power of focusing on the new routine, focusing on the new habits, because when you prime your brain, you program your brain for a different way of being, it makes it a lot easier to cut out or destroy old egos, right? It makes it a lot easier to cut out old habits, bad habits that are blocking you, that seem like distractions, right? They only seem like distractions because you're more focused on that thing, you're more focused on the drug or social media or whatever, than you are on the work itself, than you are on your exercise, right? Your fitness routines, than your diet, whatever it is that you're being distracted from, right? You're not putting your focus onto that thing, and you're not keeping your focus on that thing. So it's like, what you have to do is, even if you are still consuming the drug, right? Even if you're still on social media, right? Watch content that will program you and prime you in a way that will make it easier to change, right? watch content on social media addiction, right? Watch content on dopamine addiction, right? Let's start to learn and understand your problem more, right? Use it in somewhat of a healthy way. And then that way, when you start to focus on different information, when you start to focus on this idea of removing yourself from stimulation, it makes it easier to do so when it actually comes time to turn the phone off or turn the computer off, right? And because you're now aware of this new information, you're more likely to stick to that plan, right? You're more likely to say, yeah, no, I'm not going to go onto social media, and I'm not going to spend all of my time and energy watching this content that has nothing to do with me, right? But you kind of start to use it to become aware of it first, right? You start to program your mind first. But then what has to happen is you have to continue by taking action, right? You have to continue by following through on that thing. You can't just watch content on dopamine all day, every day for the next few months, year, whatever, right? You have to watch that content, but then understand that that means now I need to take action, right? You've understood what you need to do. Now it's time to actually go about doing it. It's time to take action. Same thing with like the timetable, right? Like any free time that you have, let's say you're consuming a drug. While you're doing it, just read over the timetable. Think about what you could be doing instead. Think about the reality that you could have instead. And if you start to focus more on that, whether you're still doing the drug or you're currently abstinent, right, and you're currently quitting the drug, you start to program and prime your brain for this new way of being, and that's going to make it easier to finally quit or continue on your quitting journey, right? And so what we actually need to do, what we actually need to focus on, is creating a stronger ego around the identity that we're trying to create, around our goals, right? So we need to allow ourselves to still have ego, right? Ego is not bad, right? But we need to learn to become the master of ego. We need to learn how to dissolve and destroy egos that don't align for the sake of recreating them. We understand that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Same thing goes with egos. Egos are just energy. They're psychological energy. So what happens when we break them down and we dissolve them, all of that psychological energy is still just in our brains. But what happens is it ends up getting crowded. It gets clogged up because that energy isn't becoming anything else. It isn't being recreated. And so it just becomes raw energy that fills the mind. So what we need to do is take all of that raw energy, and instead of allowing it to recreate itself around whatever habits we have now, right? So if we're in an unconscious loop and we have destroyed some ego, what's going to happen is that psychological energy is just going to reshape itself around whatever like new way of being we have, whatever habits we're doing now, whatever flow we're in right now. And so what we need to do is change that flow and allow ourselves to create the ego, allow that psychological energy to form itself and shape itself around this new way of being that we're trying to create. And the way we do that is by constantly thinking, constantly feeling, and constantly acting upon that version of self that we want to become, right? So that's it for this video. That's all I got. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you want anything else on spirituality, self-improvement, fitness, the mind, click the subscribe button. Other than that, though, I'm out. Peace.